Hi, welcome to Big Sexy Chat. I'm Crystal.
I'm Murph.
We're just two rad fatties sitting around,
Chewing the fat.
Twice a month, we'll be chatting about current events,
Hot topics.
sex toys, fat politics, fat community, cannabis, CBD, you name it, we're going to talk about it. We are very excited to have you a part of our community. Welcome and enjoy. Hey there, welcome back to Big Sexy Chat. My name is Crystal, and I have my lovely hostess here with me too.
Hi, it's Murph.
Hi, Murph.
Hi.
We're very excited. We have a really special guest today, and we're going to talk all about the subject, perimenopause, menopause, and how it works in our brains, at least for those of us who are born with ovaries. Well, I'm 50, almost 56. I can tell you it's quite a journey, so I'm really excited to talk about this. Welcome, Karelin.
Thank you so much for having me here. My
Thank
big
you.
sexy ladies. It's so nice to be here.
Very
We're
cool.
glad to have you.
Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, like what your qualifications are, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So just like Murph, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been providing therapy for probably the past 13 years. I think I was saying 11 years for like the longest time. I think I'm upgrading myself to 13 years now. So I primarily see individual clients. I have both a small private practice, and I also work for a wonderful company where I get to provide EAP services. And so that's primarily what I've done for the past 13 years. As I've been kind of heading into, I'm far into, I'm 46. So as I've been heading into the perimenopause kind of journey, something that's really kind of come to mind is sort of the lack of information. I've been trying to sort of discover more and more about this. There's definitely like influencers out there. There's a couple of really fantastic, female doctors and that sort of thing. But just in terms of like the people that surround me in my life, kind of knowing about menopause or perimenopause, what that is, what it looks like, I just found that that was such an area where people didn't really know. And as we all know, as women, a lot of times issues that affect just us aren't necessarily quite as studied or quite as, kind of researched, or, we don't have quite as much information about it. So that kind of drawn me into specifically kind of doing coaching work around that with women who are going through either perimenopause or menopause. And so that is kind of what brings me here. It's both my own personal journey and something that I'm trying to kind of get out to as many women as I can. So I know people say it all the time, right? Like, I don't do this for the money, but I really don't. Like, I'm really just so excited to get to talk with women and kind of let them know that this isn't their fault. You're not failing. You're just going through, a pretty cataclysmic change when it comes to your bodies, your hormones, that sort of thing.
I was going to interject here that it really pisses me off about how much money has been spent on trying to create drugs to help men have erections and men's heart disease and all those other things related to men. And then they try to extrapolate data about how it affects men to women. And it's just such bullshit. I'm over it. It's our turn. Please start studying us, study our libidos, study our sexual response, we have a lot going on, man. It's a lot right now.
Right. Yeah. I just literally, one of the women that I follow, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, she literally posted a TikTok this morning that was kind of that. It was a research study and talking about the fact that we are not just small men or men with different kind of body parts. Like, we are our own thing. And absolutely, I was thinking this morning, like, I can't imagine if men, from 35 to 55 went through this huge change. And not that men don't, men definitely deal with hormone changes as well. But if they went through this, like, truly cataclysmic, that was the word that she used, and it really stuck with me, this cataclysmic body change, we would have so much information about it. I went to my doctor in probably my mid 30s and I said, I'm noticing some stuff going on with me. I think maybe I'm in I think it's called perimenopause. And her response to me was like, yep, you're over 35. So you are. And that was our entire conversation. I think I've been prescribed antidepressants to kind of deal with that, with the symptoms that I'm experiencing. But my goodness, like, that's really it. So absolutely. I think it's kind of, it boggles my mind that we don't have more information, that we as women don't have more training, information, kind of preparedness for this. And like I said, I lost my mother very young. I lost my mom around kind of my mid 30s. I know that she went through menopause, but we never really talked about it. I was young. I thought menopause was something that happened when you were old. So we never really talked about it. And so I've just kind of been in the dark, and our medical system hasn't been super helpful, I guess is how I would say it.
Very sorry about your mom. I know nobody's ever ready to lose their mom. But also I want to just say that sort of trope that goes around a lot about if men were the ones that were having babies, you'd be able to get an abortion on every fucking corner, every 7-Eleven, every Safeway, every Walgreens. Like it'll be everywhere.
Yep, I'm you can just see it when you see, like, the videos of guys that don't know anything about menstruation, and, "Well, where do you put this thing?" And it's a tampon, it's like, "Come on, guys," like, so, you take that and you extrapolate that onto, like, okay, they were the ones, like, making the medical system and building all of that and then not studying women, and yeah, it's such a shit show. Um, I wanted to share that, I recently went to my GYN in regards to perimenopausal symptoms and struggling with this process as an quote unquote elder millennial. Um, I'm 41 years old, and so I just felt like I'm going crazy. I don't understand what's happening. I'm having all these types of symptoms that are just, uh, akin to what I felt was like I'm not me. I'm not in my body. And my GYN said something interesting to me. She said, it's not uncommon for, individuals to feel this way, but also it's like puberty. Your body's going through a whole nother stage and it's something where you're completely out of control of what's happening to you, and so you're trying to make these accommodations in a way that you've never experienced before, and so how do you do that without having that information? And then she spoke to exactly what you said. The medical field has let us down, like, nobody has studied this in the way that they should have, and so, it's wild to me to think of, like, okay, when I was young, quote unquote, right? Um, Thinking of like you said, and that's what happens to you when you're old, and it really isn't. And so trying to wrap my brain around like what is happening to me in my late 30s and early 40s, and this isn't, how can this be common? And it was just kind of like, well, yeah, that's what it is. Sorry, here's a couple of different things that you can try. Um, but I'm curious what was the thing that really kind of got you into addressing this and wanting to provide coaching?
I think, for me, I was really fortunate in meeting my husband. I like I said, I went through a divorce kind of in my early 30s. I met my husband, and we began dating. We're now married. I was really fortunate that he is not someone who co-signs on my bullshit. So he has reflected back to me like, you know, it seems like there's some anxiety stuff going on. It seems like there's some changes going on for you. And I think as a woman, and I think for most of us as Americans, we're kind of taught that, like, just keep going, like, just keep plowing through. I can't tell you how many clients I see in my therapy practice who all the way through COVID, would show up into therapy and be like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm feeling depressed. It's like, oh, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, guys. But we all were just like, just keep going to work, keep doing your thing. And I think it's the same thing for menopause, that we just are kind of told, just like, keep plowing ahead. Like, this is just what it is to be a woman. To go through 20 years of changing symptoms, and things that really are quite impactful. So I really began to kind of pay attention to that. Um, and I think for me, the things that I noticed most were the mood symptoms. And as a therapist, there's a lot of kind of guilt and shame, in the fact that I didn't feel like I could completely manage those things. I was having these kind of anger and depression outbursts around my period. I'd never really experienced PMS before. I'd been on the pill with my previous husband. Don't need to be on the pill now. And so I don't have kind of the regulation of that, but I just never had really had PMS symptoms. And all of the sudden we would have these giant blowout fights. And then 2 days later, my period would show up and I would have to, kind of go back and say, hey, yeah, remember that thing that we talked about 2 days ago? Well, my period's here. I feel totally better. Things are okay. And I feel really grateful that my husband's kind of rode the wave with me because, and I'm one of the lucky ones. My period is actually on like a 25-day cycle. So I get it, feels like I get it all the time. Um, and so that for me, like, I had never experienced that before. And it's possible that I have PMDD or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is very intense, kind of all of those PMS symptoms, but really intense. Like to the point of, thoughts about suicide or self-harm that I never, would have had otherwise. And again, like as a therapist, there was a lot of shame in that of like, what is wrong with me? And so I've seen naturopaths, I've seen doctors, I've seen holistic practitioners, I've talked to Ayurvedic, folks. I've kind of talked to everyone about it. And my symptoms, I definitely am in a place where I am much more able to kind of manage my symptoms. I literally, let my husband know, like, hey, like here's when my period's coming. We know, a couple of days before that. It's hard because I don't know about for any of you guys, but for me, all of that feels, quote unquote, very real. So all those thoughts I'm having, all those feelings that I'm having feel very real. And it feels very kind of dismissive or minimizing to say, well, oh, you're PMSing. Like, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of like negativity in that, right? Like we've heard that our whole lives, like, oh, you're just PMSing. Yeah. And it's a nightmare,
Yeah.
like, so that is what
It makes me
really
ragey and stabby.
all the things makes me ragey and stabby. And I also want you to take care of me because I feel really vulnerable and sensitive.
Yes,
But
yeah.
I also want to, yes, I also want to stab you. An old therapist that I used to have would say, it's really hard to hug a porcupine. And she's right. It's hard if I'm being ragey and stabby, it's hard for my husband to want to hug me
For
and
sure.
love on me. But I also need it at that moment. So that's kind of what brought me into the space. And for me, I think what has really made the shift, and this might be disappointing for folks, I don't have the magic answer of like how to make all this stuff go away. But what really I think is making the shift is not viewing my body and these things as a problem to solve at the failure that I'm having, but instead, like you said, Murph, like something that I need to kind of adapt to. Like this is what my body is right now. And man, my body is an amazing thing. And
Yeah.
I really have to adapt to this and treat my body differently.
I remember going to my therapist and I'm like, "Look, what is this? Is it PTSD? Is it grief? Is it the pandemic? Is it Trump? Is it all the profound loss I've had in my life? Is it depression?" She's like, "Yes, yes." Intrusive thoughts? Yes. Crystal, perimenopause. I'm like, How long does this last?" She goes, "Well, it could last like a decade." I went, "Shut the front door." Nobody told me. I didn't know it was gonna last 10 years or more for some people. But it was like, yeah, all those things, Crystal. You're probably feeling all of those things all at the same time.
Yeah. I I said to my GYN, "I'm kinda concerned because I'm going from 0 to murder." And she was just like, oh, yeah, yeah." Like, that's actually really common. But what I was most surprised about, with the mood was just the drop of sex drive. For me, it happened so quickly that and I've always been a high sex drive person. I've always, really, felt like that was kind of my core identity, and so having that kind of stripped away impacted me in a mental health way that I wasn't prepared for. And talking to my GYN, she was just like, "I know," and she's like, I'm in it right now too." And she goes, "The best thing I can tell you is to start scheduling that stuff and to really like when you feel like it has to happen. It can't be like one of those things where you're like, well, we'll put it off till 8 o'clock. Like if you're feeling like, okay, I think I can do this. I think I'm feeling a little bit sexual and maybe want to have some attention, do it right when you feel that way because that when you put it off, she's like, it will immediately drop."
Yep.
Anybody else have that experience?
I think it's so interesting because so we've got our three primary hormones are estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. One of the symptoms of low testosterone or low progesterone is low libido. Estrogen dominance also gives us kind of low libido, and all of that is changing. Kind of vaginal dryness happens, so maybe having or difficulty even achieving orgasm. So there may just be kind of like like sex just isn't quite as interesting, or maybe even it's painful, or simply just a drop in libido because our hormones are changing as we're going through perimenopause and menopause and still getting our cycle. So these things are still fluctuating throughout the month. So it's not even just like, oh yeah, like I have low testosterone, I know what that feels like, but it's throughout the month that feels differently. I'm telling you, when my period hits, I physically feel that stuff draining out of me, and we call it Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I literally like come back to, I think it's Hyde, that's the normal one, right? No, it's Dr. Jekyll. Anyway, I literally come back to much more normal. There's a fantastic video on YouTube that compares it to like this werewolf thing where that, absolutely. So yeah, I think that that's, and like you said, like if that's something that you've identified with your whole life, it's something that's such a part of your relationship with your husband. And then suddenly like to have low libido or even just to have changes in, vaginal dryness, which maybe you've never had before, can really impact us. And like I said, it just leaves us feeling like, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why am I failing?
I can definitely relate to all the things that Murph just said, especially I kind of became menopausal like overnight because on a Tuesday, the doctor said, "Do you want to have a hysterectomy on Thursday?" And I said, "Yes." And then Friday, I was without any ovaries. So definitely things came crashing for me down. And not like Murph, a big part of my life was my sexuality, my sex drive, my desire, my interest. Like, all went crashing down for me. But I want to say, you think about how little we all know about it, and like Murph talked about earlier, how men don't even understand about periods. So they have even less information than we have, like way less. And I don't think they know. Most of us don't know how to deal with this. Most of them don't know how to deal with this.
It makes me kinda go back to that thought of, like, when old white politician males would say, like, "Well, you can't have a woman in there in the office because, she'd be hysterical." And it's like, okay, well, the age range that they were intending at around then is someone in perimenopause, and honestly, I'm like, "Well, yeah, but, obviously who's in there now and all the things, then it's terrible." But, the whole system needs an overhaul, and I think women would be the perfect ones to do that. But it's like, okay, if that's the kind of mindset that everyone already has is like that middle-aged woman is just hysterical and can't get it together. Well, maybe if you had done some research as to why that, is happening or why you see that with that age group. Oh, huh, I wonder. Well, maybe it's because perimenopause.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, uh, even for my husband, he kind of approaches it in this way of like, but what is wrong? Like what is and I know that he's not doing that in a way to try to make me feel guilty or make me feel bad. That's how he views his own kind of journey with his body. He has a lot of kind of physical things that he deals with that he's been working on in a lot of different ways. But when he asked me like, well, what, if we're treating this with whatever, with a supplement, with hormone replacement therapy, with naturopath, whatever that is that we're approaching that with, it always feels like to him like we're treating the symptom and not the cause. Like, and it's like there isn't a cause. Like the cause is menopause. Like the cause is this is what our yes. Like he said to me the other day, it can't be that women have been doing this for eons and it's like this. And I was like, yeah, no, it is. It's like women have been dealing with childbirth and cramps and PMS and menopause and all of this stuff for eons. And we've just been doing it. We've just been kind of pushing through and we've been thinking, that we deserve to feel this amount of pain or this amount of, whatever that is. And so I think that is what you guys have been such an inspiration in trying to kind of look at my body and not immediately think about what's wrong with it, because I'm overweight. But instead, it's like, looking at my body and really being able to like celebrate and love on that. I appreciate and value all of you so much for that.
Thank you for that.
And I think, yeah, I think that that's what I'm kind of hoping to do with menopause, right? Is that there is nothing wrong with you. What is going
Yeah.
on is that you're going through menopause.
It's a natural part of the evolution of your humanness. Like that's what's going to happen. So why is it always still so mysterious and taboo? And I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I was just going to say that. Oh, no, I forgot what I was going to say. See, that's menopause. That's what you know. What I tell people, Carolyn. Um, since I became perimenopausal and menopausal, I can never remember my words. I have something called word aphasia. I can remember those words, word aphasia, but I can't remember the words. And I remember now what I was going to say. Did you get to listen to our hysterectomy episode at all?
I did. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't
That was what kind of like made me raise my hand of like, let's talk more about this.
that part where Tigress talks about, losing her diva cup in the bathroom, the public bathroom, and and then like having blood goes everywhere, and she's cleaning it up for like an hour, and her friend has to go get her new change of clothing, and like, and then she talks a lot about how sometimes you have such a big blood clots, it's like a squid or octopus like rolling down your leg in the shower, and I was like, if men had any fucking idea how can be very disgusting. I'm not disgusted, but it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. They would have no idea. They have no idea. They have no idea. But I do. I know we protect them from that, and we should need to stop doing that, but it it's so much. No, there's no way.
Yeah, it is. I actually literally I remember vividly. I listen to you guys when I'm out for a walk with my dog, and I vividly remember hearing that part of it and feeling like so seen. Like I've never had something quite that large. But I think we've all experienced that. You're in the shower or you're, dealing with your period, whatever. And I just felt like it was so nice to hear someone else talk about that.
Yeah, I agree. I that episode was very validating for me. And I am glad we're having this conversation too, because I think, there's so many individuals that just don't we're so shamed about our bodies and knowing about our bodies. And so I think that's what really helped me when my GYN said, this is like puberty, because we as a society think of puberty as like, oh, that's happening to these teenagers, not they're the cause of it. It's just this is happening and they're going through a hard stage. And that sort of kind of led me to think in terms of like this menopausal process as this is happening to me. There's nothing wrong with me in this process. I'm navigating this like a teenager's navigating puberty. And that was really helpful in me kind of reframing how I looked at it.
Number one, I'm going to steal that. I think that that's a great, very validating, normalizing. But number two, who goes through puberty? Boys and girls, right? Who goes through menopause? It's just us. So I think that it's such an interesting way to kind of frame that, Murph. I love that.
Yeah, I've had a lot with this process of just trying to, find little things that increase my understanding or make me feel like, okay, you're not going quote unquote crazy. These are just natural things that are happening, whether it's the waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back to sleep. That's awful. The feeling the zero to murder, the loss of sex drive. Like it's so much and it feels like it's coming at me from all angles. My husband said to me the other night, remember we need to do blah, blah, blah. And I was like, please don't tell me to remember anything. Like right now, I hate to say it, but it's like it literally comes in my brain and goes out unless I have a sticky note next to me that I can write it down on or put notes in my phone. And I've never had that, so it's really navigating a whole new phase of life. And I wish there was some sort of guidebook to that.
Murph, today I was eating some lunch and I got it to go, but I was going to eat a little bit on the front patio. And I knew I'd just taken my fork out of the thingy. And then I'm like, where did my fork go? And I'm looking all over. I'm lifting stuff up, trying to find my fork. What did I put it back in the bag? It's in my left hand. I'm like, that's never happened to me before. It's before menopause. And it's like I have to be so intentional with everything if I really want to commit it to memory. I can't just go about no. Okay, now I'm going to put my keys here. I'm going to put my nail polish there. Here's the remote control. Always put the remote control in that same spot. Otherwise, I drive myself nuts looking for crap. I know that our fat bodies and adipose tissue creates estrogen, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
So that brings me to my question, which is it different for those of us who have a lot more adipose tissue because we have that more, I don't know, maybe we have more estrogen. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I've kind of been building my coaching business, so kind of how I offer that is, a 12-week sort of course, like you said, Murph, of like, let's go over the basics, let's go over all the basics in terms of, how this is affecting your body, how it's affecting your mind, how it's affecting these different things. And it's interesting, even within it's been a little disappointing that even within this field, it is so, a lot of the focus, because weight gain is a very natural part of menopause, as you can imagine, a lot of the focus is how do you lose that weight? How do you shed that weight? All of that kind of stuff. We get so lost in that kind of bullshit versus, hey, how do you not stab your husband? Like that would be a better thing for me to learn. So I think it gets kind of lost in the shuffle, and there isn't in doing the research. I've tried to do the research around that. And a lot of this kind of comes back to I've seen it in a couple of different places that there is a high risk of bias when it comes to studying, fat women going through menopause. That it's hard to tell if the results are because of, that fat bias or if the results are kind of normal. But like you said, so fat cells produce estrogen. So that's something to know. They do know that the hormone replacement therapy might kind of impact fat bodies a little differently. I know you guys have talked about that, kind of how medications impact our because our bodies are different sizes, medications impact our bodies differently. So there is kind of that sort of thing. So that's something that I'm really trying to sort of ground myself in, is that and I know a lot of folks say this, that they want to have healthy, they're here to make sure that you're healthy, but really the underlying thing is I want to make sure you're thin. That means you're healthy. That's truly, truly not what I'm talking about. I really do want my clients to feel healthy and happy and that sort of thing. But absolutely, I think that, our different bodies, it's really interesting, to think about how our hormones, impact these different things, that we could be experiencing brain fog, because there's, our different hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone being the primary, but there's also cortisol, there's insulin, there's all these things being affected. And a lot of those things impact blood flow. The research that they did, I know I grew up being told how scary hormone replacement therapy is. And there still is, a moderate level of research, that we should be cautious, and that certain folks, maybe it's that kind of a higher risk for them. But I always grew up just hearing like how scary that was. And my mom passed away from dementia. So as I'm experiencing this brain fog, there is a part of me that's going, well, is this dementia symptoms? Is it just normal kind of brain fog? Is this just normal kind of getting older? And so I've been really, really hesitant. Someone once said to me, I think your mom had that early onset dementia because she was taking hormones. And so I've been really kind of afraid of that. But as I'm kind of learning more, the original research, the thing that got us all so scared of hormone replacement therapy, was done on women who were postmenopausal. And yeah, they had already been through that change, and it impacts our blood vessels. Like I said, because there's that big change in hormone, it literally impacts the way that our body functions. It impacts our brain, the functioning of those things. It impacts blood vessels. And so those women were then given, estrogen following menopause, and they were like throwing clots and having heart problems because they'd already been through that problem. And so, that there is a lot of things that get impacted, by that experience for sure.
I forget what year it was when that like big splash of news came out, like HRT, it's going to cause this and that. And I remember several women who I'm very close to who just like quit their hormones like that day. They didn't titrate down. They just stopped taking them because they're worried they're going to, whoa, let me tell you, talk about Jekyll and Hyde. I saw such a difference in their personalities and everything for like because they just went cold turkey off of it, and I'm like, "Are we sure that's the right way to handle this? We have enough data to know to stop taking it tomorrow." Like, it was a big deal. It was in People Magazine and Reader's Digest and on the news. It was like, HRT, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, "Okay, y'all, but maybe let's go about this a little more, be a little more sensible about this."
Yeah. So I think what we found, and again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not here to sell any kind of medical treatment, but what the research that I have done for myself, because HRT is something that I've kind of begun to explore with my own doctor, is that it's actually preventative, that it actually helps our brain keep enough of those hormones in order to stay healthy longer. It helps our blood vessels stay healthier longer. And so, like I said, I think that there's definitely some risk factors. There's definitely some people that it's not the right choice for. But what I've learned for me personally is that it feels like it's actually kind of preventative. I was really, really hoping it would kind of be this magic bullet. I was really, really hoping that I'm doing the estrogen patch, and I was doing another pill, to try to kind of avoid my period. But man, my period's strong. It's stuck in there. They gave me a pill that was supposed to mean that I started skipping my period. Um, and so that I wouldn't have this kind of up and down of PMS kind of around that, or PMDD, if that's, what's going on. My period still showed up strong. So I'm currently kind of just sticking with the estrogen, as well as a couple of great supplements that I think have been helpful, that I've heard are helpful for other folks. But that it is kind of preventative, that it actually shows a decrease in the risk of Alzheimer's and dementia, a decrease in the risk of, a couple of other kind of issues that tend to come up for us, because all of a sudden, boom, we drop these hormones and our body kind of starts cannibalizing itself, kind of starts sort of dealing with that in ways that maybe aren't super healthy for us. So It's definitely a choice that we all have to make. But yeah, I remember that so vividly. And I just remember being so scared of HRT and just thinking like, nope, no, that
Yeah,
is not for me. And
right.
that's how I got here, kind of at the end of the line of trying everything else. And then, finally saying, well, let's give this a try.
They need to do all the press on those studies that they did when they say, "Everybody to stop taking your HRT," because there's a lot of us that need that information. I was not given an option to take HRT after my hysterectomy because I had a little bit of cancer, and they don't like to give it to you because they think the HRT could possibly make the cancer spread more easily or more quickly. I don't know the exact data, but now that I'm considered cancer-free, I'm thinking about asking about it again, or I'm pretty sure I have undiagnosed, ADHD. I maybe need Adderall or Ritalin, or maybe I need hormones, but I need something. Please, I have shit to do, man.
That's something that's really kind of bugged me is, like, I feel like I'm in my prime when it comes to my profession and, being able to do stuff, and it's like, boom, you're hit with this life phase of just, like, utter nonsense, and I don't know how many other women that I work with right now that are, within 5 years of my age that are all just melting down, and it's just like, I just wanna say, like, "It's normal, it's okay," and I usually do, but at the same time, it's just like, why can't everyone else around us see that, like, this is not okay? Like, we as a whole are experiencing something that's really transitional and scary and overwhelming and just all the things, right? And so my thing has been I've kind of started gathering like a toolkit of like asking folks, what's your tip? What's something that's working for you? What's the thing that like is adding to it? And I mean, I have a whole list of stuff that I think like really helps me specifically. And so when I ask that question, it's usually like, well, I'll try that out and see if that's, something I've tried primrose oil for to try to get to sleep at night. I didn't really have success with that, so I was like, "Okay, well, moving on to the next thing," magnesium, that's helping a little bit, so it's just kind of like this it's kind of like being a guinea pig, to tell you the truth, but finding those little things help, take I kind of call them micro resiliencies, right? It's not gonna solve the thing, it's not the silver bullet like you were saying, Carolyn, it's more of just like, what can I do to kinda get me through the day so I'm not losing my shit? Because I tell you, there's nothing like being in an executive meeting or something like that, and all you're imagining is, like, the worst possible shit happening in the room, and you're the cause of it because somebody said something, and you're just like, "Stab me, stab me, stab me," which is not good, but, I think recognizing that a lot of the same people in the room may have some of those symptoms too, but nobody's talking about it.
Oh, did I mention stabby and cunty? For real.
Always stabby and cunty.
Oh,
That should be
man.
my new, like, little bio.
Murph, I think, your, micro-resiliency tips or whatever would be a great, thing to put in the, show notes or, even in a blog because, of course, we can do all the same, the normal we're not doctors, but this is just anecdotal, but, you might wanna we know this works for Murph, and this worked for Crystal. This might work for Ashley, this worked for Carolyn, and who knows, maybe it will work for you if you wanna here's our ideas.
Yeah, I love that. I think, that's how we talk about community all the
Yeah.
time on this pod. I think that's really it. I've joined a couple of, perimenopausal groups on Facebook to try to just hear, like, what other people are doing. TikToks are huge with me, so I'm doing that as well and just trying to gather that information and try stuff out. And honestly, I think it's interesting. One of the things that helps me the most is marijuana. I can take an edible and my "I'm going to, murder you," drops down to just like, "Ugh, just leave me the fuck alone." Rather than just feeling like, "Ah," all the time, I'm like, "Okay, I can handle this."
I used
But I
to
can't
say
do that at work,
right.
like, it's like, "Fuck."
I used to say, married people understand homicide, like, how it might happen, And I'm not married, but, people in long-term relationships can start to understand why some people become homicidal. It's just like, oh my God, the person you love the most, you want to murder the most. And I don't know if that's just me or if that's everybody. I'm getting the feeling it's everybody. but I hate feeling like that, and I don't want them to feel like I wanna, they have to sleep with one eye open at night, you know?
I've told my husband over and over again, because I've gotten sucked into the true crime world, if you want to leave me, just you can leave. You do not have to murder me. And vice versa. Like I promise that I will not murder you. I will just leave. But yeah, I think it was Angela Davis. I saw a great and she was on like a late night talk show, and I think it might have been Jimmy Kimmel, and he turned to
Yes.
her and just said, yeah, he turned to her and said, I don't really know much about this menopause thing. And the look on that woman's face,
Can I just
of,
say,
like,
she went through I could hear the words just from her eyes and the faces that she made, like, it was so initially like, "I'm gonna fucking kill you," to like, "Are you that dumb?" to, "I'm gonna have to explain this to this white man," to, "Okay, I can calm down, I can handle," like, you can see the phases of it.
yeah. And I thought just seeing a woman, she just carries her, she is just a beautiful, like, strong woman, and to see, like you said, to see all of that cross over her face, and then what did she call it, Merv? She called it, like, just a black hole or
Yeah.
something like that, right? And
Yeah.
it was just, again, like, just so validating, and I think I saw you posted online the other day, "I'm having trouble with sleep, I think it might be this perimenopausal thing." All these women responded to you because it was just like, "Oh, yeah," like, "Oh, we're talking about this?" Like, "Yes." And that is definitely, again, that's another thing that really drew me to coaching. In my work as a therapist, it's very private. I can tell the clients that I'm working with, "Oh yeah, I hear this all the time. Like, trust me, like, I deal with this. I hear about it all the time." But it isn't like this community thing. And so that's one of the things that really drew me to coaching as well, is the opportunity to build that community of women kind of talking with each other about this and actually sharing about this, and really beginning to do that. But yeah, I think it's definitely something I'm hearing more and more of this, like in big time media, like on late night talk shows. I have no idea I have no idea what came before that, like why he asked this woman about menopause.
And
Um,
and I think she had the look of like, "Is this a joke?" Like, her eyes kinda squinted down and, like, kind of narrowed in, like, are you kidding?" And then, like, realized, like, "Okay, I'm really gonna have to do that." But yeah, I don't know how that came about, but, that was one of the most brilliant, just real moments of watching someone go through all the thoughts in their head of, like, and as somebody who's experiencing this, like, I wonder how often I look like that when someone asks me a stupid question because I'm just like, "Wow," like, I felt every single one of those visible cues that she had, and that was like you said, that was so powerful and impactful because she's such a poised person and so intelligent and so and I could just be like, "She's holding her tongue right now before she goes off on him."
I have to find this, Jimmy Kimmel, I'll have to check out YouTube.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, you guys should, yeah, you should link to it. So, I mean, her face was just, um, but I think it would be, I would love to kind of hear maybe other things, Murph, or even Crystal, like some of the things that you guys have found. I think for me, one of the biggest things for me, that I really started to notice in my mid-30s was my relationship with alcohol. I happen to live kind of in the foothills of California, right next to some beautiful wine, regions, going wine tasting, spending days out, kind of picnicking with friends. I feel very lucky. That was kind of a big part of my life. I'm a foodie. I love to go wine tasting. You get to talk with the winemakers, kind of in the region that I'm in. And it was just always really wonderful. But then I would notice again, my husband would notice, that he was catching some shit like the following days, that my mood would really drop like the next 2 days. And I kept doing it. I kept like, going out with friends, having a couple glasses of champagne, going out with friends, having a few drinks, going wine tasting. And then the next day I would just be like so depressed. And I feel very fortunate because as a therapist, I get to practice this stuff all the time. Like every day, I get to practice this stuff of being mindful, being aware. And it finally started, a day after I went out drinking, I would notice like, okay, I feel sad for no reason. And that's something that I also want to encourage, women and men to begin kind of noticing, like, am I attaching a story to this physical feeling? I think somatic, which is, when we say somatic, we mean kind of body specific work. I think somatic therapy is kind of going to be the next big thing. I think we've been on this sort of mindful cognitive trip for a long time because it's easy to research. I think and it is really powerful. It definitely, cognitive behavioral therapy is one of our foundations. But I think somatic kind of work is our next kind of big groundswell. And I think there's lots of fantastic practitioners out there talking about that, but really not trying to connect a story with the physical sensation, and really kind of separating out like, oh, I had too much caffeine. It's not that I feel anxious. It's that my body, that the feelings I'm experiencing in my body seem like anxiety. I had a drink yesterday and today I'm feeling depressed, quote unquote. But really, this is just how my body would just kind of take a hit. So for me, unfortunately or fortunately, I've really had to change my relationship with alcohol. Primarily, I'm sober. I just don't really drink anymore because I know I'm going to have to deal with it the next day or two. So for me, sort of changing that relationship with alcohol has been really helpful. I always come back to exercise, nutrition, sleep, social. Those are kind of our foundational emotion regulation skills. And exercise doesn't have to be like this huge, like cardio gym thing. I just take my dogs for a walk, every day. I really enjoy that. My husband and I went to, started taking dancing lessons, things like that have been really fun. So for me, those have been kind of the big pieces. As well as, and you might want to try this, Murph. It's called a cortisol manager, because typically what's happening as we're sleeping is that our cortisol is spiking. That's what's waking us up at night. So I started taking just a supplement, a cortisol manager that I buy off Amazon. And it's really helped me sleep a lot better through the night. There's still times, I know the week before my period, I'm typically I feel like I don't sleep at all. I feel like I have insomnia. I know I'm sleeping some, but it doesn't feel like it. And even no matter what I do, that's still there. But I've really found that for the rest of the time, that cortisol manager has been pretty helpful. But like you said, it's so hard because it's different for everybody.
No, but I think, that's when we go and we talk about this and have these conversations, like that post that I made on social media, there were some people in there that were like, is this what's happening to me? Because it's just like we're not having these conversations. So I think the more of just sharing like, hey, this worked for me or this didn't work, like it is so impactful to people in a way that I don't think a lot of us realize. So yeah.
What if we went back a few steps and just define what does perimenopause and menopause, how are they defined?
Sure. So perimenopause occurs typically starts as early as 35 and as late as like 45. And it's just kind of the beginning of that, sort of beginning of those hormone changes. You might notice a change in sort of your period cycle. Like I did, you might notice an increase in sort of the intensity of your PMS symptoms. And so you might notice some weight gain. Your body might not be, a lot of people are like, I'm still doing what I used to do. Like I'm eating normal, I'm exercising, but all of a sudden I have kind of weight gain. All that stuff is because these hormones are changing. Menopause is typically starts as early as 45 or as late as 55, and is a full year of no period. That's how we really define that you've been through menopause. It's a full year without a period. And again, a variety of symptoms are happening there. That's going to be much more typically where you see things like the typical hot flashes, the night sweats, still a lot of like mood swings, brain fog, all of that kind of stuff is also going to accompany us into menopause. And like you said, like this could be a decade, right? Like, and here I was, a relatively very fortunate woman, I've got a master's degree. I've had the support of loving friends and family my entire life. I had no idea that I was in perimenopause. No idea. So I think I'm just so excited to kind of get this word out there to women and like you said, to men as well. Like this is, if you are, if you have women in your life or people with ovaries in your life who are going, who are 35 or older, probably, and you're saying to yourself, what's it, something's happening here. Probably this is what's happening, right? And she doesn't have any control over it. We're all just kind of doing the best we can.
One of the biggest surprises to me was that perimenopause can last 10 years. And honest to God, I usually see like between 6 and 8 women on my table a day removing their hair. And I tell them all, I don't know if you know this, anybody's told you, but perimenopause can be 10 years. And like, they're like, okay. And also registered to vote. Okay. But these are some things we don't know about that we all need to know. Nobody told me it could be 10 years, a whole fucking decade.
Yeah, and going back to like the concept of fat liberation for a younger generation so that they're not doing, diet culture and all of that. Same thing with this. It's like instead of that idea that we grew up with like menopause happens when you're old, which is nonsense because 50 isn't old, but yeah, we have this, like, hush hush, don't say anything about it, you go through that when you're old, and now it's like, we're gonna have this whole generation that's going to get to recognize, "Hey, stuff's happening to me, I'm 37 now," and realizing, like, something's going on. Oh, yeah, this is what that is, and hopefully by that time, those individuals have had more research, more things happening in the medical field, because from what I understand from my GYN is that now that this is starting to become a more prevalent discussion, there's more research being done around it. There's more funding going towards, you know, people finding out more information of how this is impacting women and what it's doing to our bodies. And so, my hope is that the next couple of generations coming up won't experience what we've had to experience.
That would be lovely. Carolyn, you asked earlier, like, what things that we start to notice in our own lives, and it was that feeling I'm going crazy, the feeling that, I've never had intrusive thoughts before, and, like, what are these? Like, to my partner or my best friend, "You shut the fuck up," is all I can think in my head, you know? Like, "You fucking shut the fuck up." And they're, like, it's people I love dearly, you know? And then, I've always been, like, a professional sleeper. I would say sleeping is my hobby. It would be, like, sleep 4 hours, wake up, be up for an hour, maybe go back to sleep for 3 or 4 more hours. It really just disturbed my sleeping patterns. I hate that part because I love my sleep so much.
Yeah, I agree. I had the zero to murder, the sleepiness, the sex drive. I also had like some of the weird like one-off symptoms. Like I got really itchy skin and I moisturize pretty regularly, but talking about like the vaginal dryness, like all those things like started to accumulate and it was like, okay, like so I'm not doing something right. Like something's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, there's estrogen creams that you can use for your skin specifically because we are deficient in that as we go through menopause. So I've been working with, I don't. Is it okay if if I share? I've been working with a company called MIDI, MIDI, and they are just focused on perimenopause and menopause. So I see my doctor online. I'm very fortunate that they happen to accept my insurance, but this is a specialist who is here just to talk with me about these symptoms. And it's been really lovely. The sessions are because it's online. I don't know what it is about being online. I know my clients feel this too. Whenever they show up like 1 minute late to a session, they're like, "I'm so sorry," and I'm like, "That's okay." Like if you showed up to my office a minute late, we'd be like, "Hey, great job." But for some reason, when it's like an online appointment, I think we feel like we have to be there right on the dot. And so my appointments with them are like 15 minutes, and it really, they really do kind of stick to that. So that's the only downside with them. But generally, just I think I've probably cried in most of my appointments with them because it's like, oh my God, like you hear me, you understand what I'm talking about. You've got some options. And primarily a lot of the options are going to be medical, right? They're going to be medical treatment, prescriptions, that sort of thing. But one of the things they've been kind of pushing recently is some of those kind of estrogen creams for both, for vaginal dryness. There's specific, estrogen creams for that, as well as like facial creams and that sort of thing. Because that itchy skin thing, that I forgot about that one, Murph. It's definitely something that I've experienced too. Yeah, so it is. There are just like some like weird symptoms. But just like I am someone who I identify as codependent. It's something I've worked on most of my life. I absolutely love, there's a fantastic book called Codependent No More. And within that book, I think she has 12 pages of just bullet list symptoms and different, kind of headed by different areas of your life where that might impact you. 12 pages of how codependency can kind of sneakily show up in your life. And I think menopause is very similar. This can show up in lots and lots of sneaky ways. I don't even really identify it with that, right? Like I'm sitting on the couch and I'm just like, oh, like please just stop talking. And I still like even in this moment before I like started talking with you, even then I was like, what is wrong with you? Like this is your husband. You love him more than anything. But you're right. Yeah, like that is yes, that's another kind of mood symptom. It's another menopause symptom. So thank you for kind of validating that for me.
I was gonna also say something I noticed as soon as I had my ovaries yanked out, skin lacks it just lacks firmness now. It just all of a sudden just felt like so different, so loose and jowly and just like instant, like overnight. It was like from firm to nothing. Like, and I was like, what? And I look in the mirror, I'm like, what's going on? But I think that's the lack of estrogen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, when not when we just have like a hysterectomy, but when we have our ovaries removed, because that's where the estrogen is being produced, you're going to suddenly kind of experience menopause. And it's possible that those symptoms might be more severe because your body hasn't really had the chance to like work up to that. So it's pretty immediate. It can be a little bit more severe, but yeah, absolutely. Like all of a sudden, like we're not getting as much, estrogen produced just suddenly in our body, even if you have any kind of surgery like a hysterectomy, but you keep your ovaries, the blood flow is going to change. So you might kind of experience some menopausal symptoms afterwards. It really is. So our bodies are such interesting creations. And so a lot of these things do kind of tie together. But again, because we're women and we haven't been studied quite as much, we don't really know as much about how those things tie together. So absolutely, I think that that makes total sense.
Have you found any, well, this kind of goes into our final question, so maybe I'll hold off on that. But have you found any things that work for you in terms of like sexual drive or anything that you kind of hear as the thing that encourages libido?
I think there, like I said, there's hormone replacement therapy. There's lots of supplements out there that are going to help with that. Even just simple mood supplements. For me, it is like you said. I think it's about learning like what works best for me. I have told my husband like, do not come for me after like 8 or 9 o'clock. It used to be like I would say like bedtime, right? Like I'm tired. I just want to go to sleep. Um, Bedtime for me is turning into like 8:30. So I'm like, "Please don't come for me at like 8 or 8:30 because I will not be interested." And I've always been a very, high sex drive person. I went through some trauma with, my first husband around that sort of thing, but with my second husband, I've got so much trust that I've been able to kind of express that a lot more. And so for me, I haven't noticed a ton of change in that. I do think maybe the estrogen has been helpful there. As I said, I'm taking kind of estrogen replacement, bioidentical estrogen. I think it's been helpful for me there in kind of building that back up again. Um, but I think making sure that you're lubricated, right? Like if you're avoiding sex because it's painful or because there's these changes and maybe you're embarrassed because of that, don't be. Like just let's get the lube. Like let's go. Definitely I think using sex toys, masturbation, porn, like whatever it is that's going to turn you on. And like you said, if you are in the mood, like let your partner know, like this is the time.
One thing I read and suggested to a lot of women over the years is that some people are visually stimulated, but for a lot of women, if you're reading things that are like sexy or maybe romantic, something about reading the smut, I mean that in the most loving way. It helps it helps improve your libido more because your brain's having to like sort of process it in a different way than if you were watching an adult film, for example. So it's like something about the reading and actually your brain processing the words and imagine what they are can kind of get you going more quickly. So just a little tip for my friends out there, and of course we all love the Eros lubricant, the silicone lubricant, and yeah, lubricant. People think, oh, something's wrong with you. I need lubricant. No, there's nothing wrong with you. You're normal. But also, even if you don't need lubricant, adding one, you'll be surprised. If you add a good one, it takes your sex from like driving a Hyundai to driving like a Rolls Royce. Even if you don't necessarily quote unquote need it, it still can really enhance things. So just get rid of that idea that, it's because we're old and we're dried up. No, that's bullshit. Some women never need a lubricant in their entire life. Someone need it from the time they're first sexually active. So let's get rid of that stuff, stupid stuff around lubricants.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, I think it's so great that we're talking about these things and that we're getting to listen to you guys talk about these things. I was just listening to the sex toy episode that you just released. Fantastic. I can't help but say that like there's the part of me that as I was listening to that was like, I can't believe like we're talking about sex, like we are all talking about sex toys here. Of course you are. Of course you are, right? But I think for me, like, it's just not something that I've been taught to talk about aside from when I get to spend time, talking with people like Murph. And so I think reading, absolutely. I'm a big fan of like fantasy, science fiction, and a lot of kind of the women's sort of version of that tends to have a lot of that in it. Had started reading this really fantastic book, and it was about like Nordic culture, which I'd never like kind of the gods and that sort of thing involved in that. And I never really read anything about that. So I told my husband about it. I was like, hey, I'm like reading this pretty cool book. And he was like, oh, sure, like I'll give it a try. And like we love it if we're both kind of reading the same thing. And I finally got like deep enough into it. I was like 3/4 of the way into it. And suddenly it was like the smuttiest, like most explicit like sexual kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, just so you know, like this is gonna get pretty raunchy, like pretty quick. But we both read it and loved it. And it's a fantastic series. I wish I could remember the name of the series right now. But really, really just wonderful, kind of wonderful book. And absolutely, it's great. I had a doctor recommend that to me years and years and years ago. Like read romance novels or like that sort of thing. And absolutely, I think it's so important for us to remember that different things turn all of us on. And so you're going to kind of have to find your way with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always really enjoyed reading erotica and or smut. I love that word. Um, and I kind of have put that a little bit on the back burner just because like I read so much during work that I'm just, the idea of reading after is just like, oh, just let me hear it. I don't want to read it. But I wonder if that would work as well because your brain's still processing and imagining it the way you would if you were reading it. I like that idea. Ooh, I've got something new to try, ladies. Wonderful. So, Carolyn, you have listened to our pod. You know our pod. Um, we ask every person that comes on our podcast what is their favorite sex toy. But when we went to FatCon, we realized that that question can be somewhat limiting. So we've kind of expanded that and made it a little bit more inclusive. So I'm gonna give you the different scenarios that you can answer of that question. So what would you say is either your favorite sex toy, your favorite sexual aid, or what makes you feel the sexiest?
Like I said, I think I don't know that I even had a sex toy until I was over 40. My husband was like, hey, like, let's go to this shop. And so I think I have to stick with like the tried and true, the magic wand. I'm very easy to orgasm. I'm very fortunate in that. And so for me, that can be like less than a minute kind of experience. So sometimes it is a little intense. So I kind of have to be thoughtful. So that's like for me, a lot of times sex toys aren't a great kind of option for me because they can just feel like really intense. But if I'm gonna go sex toy, it's definitely the magic wand.
I like that.
Plus I like
Uh,
that it's a plug-in and I don't have to worry about those dang batteries.
right? You listened to our last episode, the first of the season. Were any of those interesting to you? Have you ever utilized a suck toy or a pulsating toy like that? All
I
right.
haven't, and that's what I'm saying. Like, as I was listening to you guys talk about how, like, how intense it was, I was kinda thinking about, like, how intense like, for it really sometimes is just so intense that it's too much for me. But yeah, I've always been kind of interested in that. So yeah, I was definitely kind of getting some ideas while I was listening.
Love it. I have that same experience too. It's just sometimes it's too fast, so I have to slow it down and find something that's not quite so intense and so like the Hitachi Magic Wand could be one and done. And then I'm like, oh, I really wanted to enjoy that a little bit more. Let me see if I can tease this out a little bit somehow.
Absolutely. So
So
Carolyn, tell us where people can find
yeah,
you. What's your course name? All the things, socials, all of it.
Sure. So I've kind of been avoiding like the socials. I know, so you can find my website is just my name, KarelinWadkins.com. That's where you find mindful menopause and kind of all I've got tons and tons of information, blogs on there. So even if you just want information, and my hope is to begin to really build a community. I'm going to be offering, I believe it's not quite finalized yet, but I believe I'm going to be offering a course through my Parks and Rec, near where I live, which I thought was again like just such a signal of I submitted my application to provide this menopause course through Parks and Rec, and I thought, well, I know they do some like mental well being kind of stuff, but what are the chances? And they responded right away and were interested in that. So I think it's such a signal that like that we're seeing that women need those. So I'm excited to really begin to build some community there. So I also realized that my website is just my name, but my name is spelled so strangely. So hopefully you can find that in the show notes. And I
You
also
can
have
spell it out right now. It's
uh,
good.
Sure. So it's Karelin Wadkins, WAD as in David, KINS. So both names are spelled more oddly than normal. And my YouTube channel, where I've been just recording short kind of mindfulness practices. It kind of began as like a place to kind of record practices for my clients, like things that I knew they needed specifically and didn't really know where they could find, is at BEE Mindful 147. And so I'm beginning to kind of load a lot more content onto there that is going to be part of the mindful menopause course as well. So hopefully that'll be available too. So those are kind of the two primary places.
Very cool. I hope we can share your course with our listeners and our community. We'll definitely put it in the show notes and we'll put the note if you can remember to tell me what the book is called, the Nordic romance sexy smutty book. Email it to you or to Murph, and we'll put it in the show notes as well because it sounds really good.
It's really, I'm like dying. The next book is going to come out in the series, and my husband and I are both dying to read it. So absolutely, I'll send it over to you.
Thanks, Karelin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time and really delving into this topic and being vulnerable and sharing your personal side of that. It's so impactful to the audience. And as you know, as a therapist, we really align with the examples and the stories that we hear. So really appreciate that. And hopefully we can, get some topics moving forward where we have these more discussions of how our bodies change and bring you back on and talk about, more of the mental health aspect of that. I think a lot of it, of our listeners are really interested in that. So
I love that
thank you
idea.
again. Yeah.
Thank you, Karelin. All right. So you can find us on all the socials, Big Sexy Chat on all of them, Instagram, Facebook. What else is there? TikTok soon is coming. Not on Twitter anymore. Back to you, Elon. And yeah, anything else we need to mention, Murph?
Like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. And you can email us if you have questions or you want to share some comments. We love it if you send us an email at sexy@bigsexychat.com. And then I think we should talk a little bit about our Facebook group.
Oh, right. Yeah. What do we call it? BSC?
BSL.
BSL, not DSL, BSL.
Yeah, a Big Sexy Listeners.
I'll have
So
to
community, right?
Yeah.
Community where you can
Yeah,
you can get on there and have conversations and have topics of things like what we're talking about right now, and talk to other people who are experiencing the same thing or want to share their ideas.
Yeah, I'll put that in the notes and I'll put it in our next newsletter as well. Thanks, y'all. See you later, alligator.
After a while, crocodile.
Toodaloo, kangaroo.